Let's go ahead and get started straight away because we have a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of time to do it. So let's go ahead and jump in, and then we will start our discourse this morning. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much just for this opportunity that you have given to us. Thank you for the opportunity for us to be here. Thank you for your grace and your word given to us, and we may understand wisdom on how to live here effectively. Pray, God, that this would be productive and that you would be glorified overall. Thank you so much for what you have done for us. For it's in your Son's name. Amen. Okay. This morning we will conclude not just this chapter, but this book. Let's go ahead and jump right in and set the stage for the rest of the chapter. We have been looking at Koheleth for one final time. We've been looking at the contents and using the research proposal as a primer for this particular book itself. Again, we've been given the introduction in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. We've been given a literature review of sorts, right, where Koheleth kind of reviews the cyclical nature of things from verses 1 to 12. Then we are given the rationale for the importance of why this research ought to be conducted. And this is verses 13 and 14, right? From chapters 2 to 8, we are given the method and design. We are given the procedure and the analysis of the data. Koheleth using case studies and what we would call naturalistic observations. He's not engaging in any of this activity with the exception of chapter 2. He's kind of put himself into this particular research. But in chapters 3 and following, he's just observing humanity and the activities of humanity and concluding based upon God's wisdom what it all means. Chapters 9 and 12 deal with the significance and the conclusion, how this research should be observed in the overall analysis. So he's taking all of the choice nuggets that he's basically already told us from chapters 2 to 8 and is summarizing them, right? And giving us what this all means. Last week, which was very painful for some of you, but not really. It was painful for some of you. But this is really addressed to the young people here. That is, those who are younger. It goes through and completes the entire trajectory of a human being's physical life. Once more, this is written within the context of those who are young and their opportunity not to squander or waste their youth on trivial pursuits. Wisdom, I hope you're paying attention. You too. Yeah, you. But to live intentionally, because their life may be short, but their youth and their privileges that come with being youthful are much shorter, right? Being young is very, very short, more shorter than the physical life we may live here on the land, right? And so you'll want to live without no regrets, right? So particularly those who are younger, take the wisdom that has been given and use it well for your benefit. This particular chapter has been kind of fascinating because Koheleth, to make this case, has been using creation, nature, and part of the culture to discuss and highlight aspects of this particular stage of life. In the preceding statements of Koheleth, again, he uses areas and aspects of creation to make a point concerning life and the activity of humanity. Koheleth has done this all over this discourse. It's not like this is the first time that he's done this. He's used the culture and creation to make these examples all throughout the book of Revelation, Ecclesiastes, but specifically here in this text to discuss essentially human growth and development. And again, how one ought not to squander their youth. Let's go ahead and jump in verse 6 of this text. It says, remember him before the silver cord is broken, and the golden bowl is crushed, and the pitcher by the well is shattered, and the wheel at the cistern is crushed, right? Now, again, I don't know anybody here. I certainly do not own a cistern, right? Or a pitcher by a well. I don't own any of that. So what is Koheleth using? Why is he using these cultural aspects? Now, this is a continuation of what he's told us in the first 5 verses to begin with in this chapter. But there's been a different focus. First of all, it's important to note that the words "remember him" do not occur in this verse. As you notice in your Bibles, these words are in italics, right? It actually starts with the word "before," not with "remember him." The reason for this is the word "before," asher, in this verse is a relative particle. This particle is used by Koheleth to introduce the next corresponding idea, or to continue this idea that he's kind of laid out in chapter 12. This phrase, or these words, "remember him," is added due to clarity. Okay. Now, I don't think you need these words here for it to be clear, but those who translated it basically wanted to make sure that it was clear to the reader. That Koheleth is re-racking the main subject found in verse 1 of chapter 12. Okay, so before, this relative particle is associated with the noun, with this particular main subject, or this main noun in this particular passage. In this case, the main noun is not the person who Koheleth is talking to, but the one to whom it refers to in chapter 12, verse 1. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, which is why they put "remember him" here, because that word here, this relative particle, is associated with this noun in verse 1. Okay. All of these things, if you notice in chapter 12, verse 6, are valuable or useful to the individual, right? We see this here: the silver cord, the golden bowl, the pitcher by the fountain, and the wheel at the cistern, right? All of these things are of value, right? Or of use to a person. A golden bowl can hold things. A pitcher by the fountain, of course, you take water and you collect water from this pitcher. And the wheel at the cistern, right, helps take water out of a well if it's deep within there, right? The silver cord is also used to pull things. By the way, I spent about 3 hours, and Will could attest to this, right? Wrestling through this text. This was probably one of the most difficult verses I think I've ever encountered in Ecclesiastes. And there's some pretty crazy, difficult statements of Koheleth. This one was difficult. Notice in this particular text here, we see the impact of these valuable, useful objects over time. So we have a silver cord, which is valuable, but this silver cord may be broken, right? Verse 6. Or removed is the literal Hebrew word. It could be either broken or removed, okay? The golden bowl is broken. Again, something of value that is broken. You can't use it, right? Same thing with the silver cord. The silver cord is removed. You can't use that. Or the pitcher or the pitcher near the well is broken or shattered. Right? You can't use a broken pitcher or a shattered pitcher. It's just laying there. You can't use it. And of course, the wheel of the cistern, right? So all of these things are valuable to some degree, and yet these things, when they are broken or removed or shattered, you cannot use. They are not, they're of no use. They're of no value, right? So putting all of this together, I am convinced that this is the main point. The main point is not, I was looking at some commentaries and they were saying that, the picture is this, the wheel is this, the silver cord represents your spinal cord. I don't believe that. It doesn't bear that out. It's not about necessarily the objects themselves, but it's about the shelf life of these objects. That's what this is about. That Koheleth once more is using cultural markers to discuss the temporal nature of youthfulness and how over time the abilities of these things, as valuable as they are, do not last. That's the point of that. Their youthfulness decreases over time. Okay? I'm convinced that this statement in verse 6 is a summation of all the things that he mentioned in verses 2 to 5. Okay? He's talking about your youthfulness doesn't last, and because of that, things don't go well. Right? He's just underscoring what he's already told us. For instance, in verses 2 to 5, let's look at kind of the differences here. Because how do I know this, right? How do I know that this is the case? Well, in verses 2 to 5, the statements of Koheleth seem to suggest that the cultural aspects of the time underscore parts of the physical body. We looked at this in verses 2 and 5. Before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars are darkened and the clouds returned after the rain, we were talking about eyesight, that our eyesight is obscured due to getting older, right? I won't run through all of these for Jane's sake. That the parts of the body are impacted due to old age. Right? I think that was very clear. But in verse 6, the statement that Koheleth makes seems to suggest the cultural items at the time underscore that this event, the event of getting old, happens in one's physical life. So remember him before the silver cord is removed, before the pitcher at the well is broken. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. They go together. Okay? How do I know this? Okay, you seem, Dr. Smith, you seem to, you seem like you got it down cold. Again, I'm still not convinced. How do you know that this is it? Well, verse 7 gives us underscores kind of the same thing in verses 5. Let's look at verse 7. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. This is very similar to what he says in verse 5. It says, furthermore, men are afraid of high places and terrors on the road. The almond tree blossoms, the grasshopper drags itself along, and the caperberry is ineffective. For man goes to his eternal home, while mourners go about in the street. This statement underscores the previous point that Koheleth made in verse 5 here. Again, this is about physical life. The pitcher, the silver cord, the golden bowl, all of these things underscore again the youthfulness and how youthfulness over time is lost. Right? I remember one time I was we had problems with our cable. and we needed to have our cable changed, and the cable guy came and he fixed our cable for us, and it was just an old box, right? We had to replace it with the new one, and we were talking to him about something, and he said a statement to me that still strikes me today. I mean, this was like 15 years ago. And he mentioned, I was like, yeah, our box is dead, and stuff like that. Could you please take this? And he goes, yeah, it's no problem. And he says, you probably have to replace this one here probably within the next 5 to 10 years. And we had mentioned, and we kind of laughed, right? Because I was like, man, it seems like everything these days doesn't last. And he said, yeah. He goes, everything has a shelf life. Everything. That includes us. We have a shelf life also. And for those who are younger, they don't really think about those things. It just doesn't register in their mind. They might believe that they live forever. Koheleth takes that with a sledgehammer and goes, no, that's not true. Your youth doesn't last. Here, anyway. Verse 8, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. He ends this discourse here the way that he began in chapter 1, verse 2. If you recall, right? This is the bookend to this particular statement. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, this is what he starts off with. Havel, says the preacher, all is vanity. This is the bookend conclusion to Koheleth's research project. Okay? Just as Koheleth sought to give the introduction to his proposal in Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 2, he concludes with this introductory statement that he began his discourse with. This statement ends Koheleth's research concerning all of the activities of humanity, right? The way that he starts off is the way that he ends. This is the conclusion here. Now, in chapter 12, verses 9 and following, it's kind of like an epilogue, right? Final thoughts of Koheleth, okay? And these final thoughts have a point, okay? Let's look. In Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 9 and 10, he writes this: in addition to being a wise man, the preacher, that is Koheleth, also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs. Why in the world would he write this? This is Koheleth, right? We already know who this is. Why is he writing that he was a wise man and he was the preacher and that he taught people knowledge? Oh, we know this already, right? Why would he do this? Well, this is somewhat the credibility section of why this research was important. Let's take a look at it. Let's look at the first word here in red, taught. This Hebrew word here is lamad. It appears 87 times in the Hebrew scriptures and 1 time in the book of Ecclesiastes. This word in various contexts is translated to teach, to instruct, or to learn something, a particular subject, or a particular thing. This Hebrew word is in the PL stem. Depending on the context and some of the words used, it can either be causative, it can be a result of something, or it can emphasize the intensity of something. Okay? I believe that this word more than likely underscores the intensity of Koheleth's actions. Koheleth taught the people knowledge. And there's a reason why I'm going to say that, but we'll get into that in a second. The second phrase I want to look at is the word pondered in verse 9. Okay? That he taught the people knowledge and he pondered. This Hebrew word is azan. This word is the only time that it occurs in the entire Hebrew scriptures. Okay? This word is translated to weigh, examine, or consider. So weighing like scales, right, to determine the weight of something, to examine, to observe, and look at and inspect, or to consider, to be mindful of. To kind of go, oh, that's interesting, right? So really, Koheleth pondered, he considered, right, these particular proverbs. This word is also in the PL stem, which I believe is intensive. Okay. Again, it underscores the intensity of Koheleth's actions. Okay. The third phrase I want to look at is the word kakar, searched out, in verse 9. It says he pondered and searched out. Kakar. This word occurs 27 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is one time in the book of Ecclesiastes. It should be book of Ecclesiastes. It occurs here in this text. It means to search or to find out, to discover, right? To look for. This word is also in the PL stem. Again, which underscores the intensity of Koheleth's actions. I believe that there's a theme here because these three words that we've looked at here are all in the stem. Lastly, I want to look at the word arranged here, because in addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, and he pondered, and he searched out, and he arranged many proverbs. Taqwan is the Hebrew word here. 3 times this word occurs, and this word occurs only in the book of Ecclesiastes. It does not occur anywhere else in the Hebrew scriptures. This word is translated to either to arrange or to place in order, right? To set, to arrange things. And if you wouldn't know it, what stem is this in? It is in the PL stem also. Okay. So what is the whole point of this particular verse here at the end of this chapter? That begins the epilogue, right? The kind of the final thoughts of Koheleth. The main point of this statement and the usages of these words, taught, pondered, searched out, and arranged, is again to speak of the intentionality of Koheleth's actions. He didn't do this by mere happenstance. He was purposefully doing this for the mere purpose of informing humanity of how to live. This not only speaks of this book, that is Ecclesiastes, but it also speaks of Proverbs, and it also speaks of Song of Songs too. Okay? That he collected and recorded these on purpose. This is why this book is important. It's not as if Koheleth, this fell into his lap, right, out of the sky. He literally woke up and went, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to set these proverbs for these reasons, for this purpose. He didn't just decide to collect these and go, man, this just seems to work out well. I appreciate this. I think I'll publish it. You know what I'm saying? No, this was, I'm going to seek to do these things, teach the people knowledge, search out and arrange proverbs. But not just any type of proverbs, as we read in verses 9 and 10, or verse 10 rather, of Ecclesiastes. The preacher sought to find delightful words and to write the words of truth correctly. This is interesting. Let's look at the word delightful. Did he just write words so that we would just be happy all the time. Delightful. Oh, it's delightful, it is. No, the Hebrew word is kaphets. It occurs 39 times in the Hebrew scriptures, okay? 7 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. I don't know why I keep putting Hebrew scriptures up there, but it's the book of Ecclesiastes. It occurs 7 times. It is translated pleasure or desire, okay? So he sought to find desirable words, pleasurable words, but that doesn't really tell us a whole lot. What exactly does this word mean, kaphets? This word in this context, really, we saw this word before, brother, too. This is not the first time that we've looked at this word in the book of Ecclesiastes. Whenever we saw this word, if you recall, back in chapter 2, or chapter 3, rather, this word in this context is used to describe the central quality of wisdom, that it brings complete satisfaction to those who adopt them. Okay? That's what it's talking about. Koheleth has actually mentioned this not only in this book in Ecclesiastes, but also in the book of Proverbs. Okay? Turn with me right quick. We'll come back to Ecclesiastes chapter 12. Turn with me to chapter 3 of Proverbs. I'm sorry. Proverbs chapter 3. Chapter 3, verse 15 specifically. Koheleth explaining wisdom and how it is profitable for the one who he is writing. It says, how blessed is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her profit is better than the profit of silver and fine gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. That word desire is kaphets. Okay? In other words, if you desire silver and jewels, that's nothing compared to wisdom. He says the same thing in chapter 8, verses 8 through 11 of Proverbs as well. This must be a new Bible, Will. I can't get the pages. Verses 8 to 11. All the utterance of my mouth are in righteousness. Right? That's not it. Oh, that is it. Yeah, 8 to 11. All the utterances of my mouth are in righteousness. There's nothing crooked or perverted in them. They are straightforward to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Take my instruction and not silver, and knowledge rather than the choicest gold. For wisdom is better than jewels, and all desirable things cannot compare with her. So desirable, again, is the word kaphets, that satisfaction, the satisfactory things cannot compare with wisdom, right? So the preacher sought to write words that bring satisfaction to one's life if they adopt those things. That is the purpose of his intention, is to give us information so that we may live a satisfactory life under the sun. Oh, that is delightful. Once more, Koheleth lays out his purposeful intentions to write straight. That's the Hebrew word there, accurately or correctly. Straight, the words of truth, emet. It was the focus of Koheleth to find and record how one ought to have the proper motivation and make proper decisions in life. He sought to write the words of reality on paper. You want to learn and know how to function in real time, in reality. Koheleth seeks to do that for the reader. Verse 11. He gives us the quality of these delightful words, these words of satisfaction and the words of truth, to write them accurately. He mentions this in verse 11. It says, the words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. Koheleth gave the benefit of the words of truth that are given by these wise men from the cultural aspects of the time. He uses, again, more cultural language here. They are like goads. Darbon is the Hebrew word. And planted nails. They are firmly fixed. They're secured in place, right? They are like planted nails, well driven. So here's a question. What are goads? What in the world is that? Well, I don't own a goad. You probably don't either, right? Well, goads are large rods used for beasts of burden, such as oxen, right? You use them to poke or push, to drive the oxen in the right direction, the direction you want them to go, or sheep as well, okay? There's something to consider here for the purposes of our discourse. That there are many people, many individuals that are convinced that they have to figure out life on their own and find their own purpose for existing. That they have to stumble through life, right? And kind of, learn from experience. Which I suppose is true to some degree. If you're doing a job, you want to make sure that, you're doing it well, right? But in terms of life itself, Koheleth seeks to intentionally write these things so that one does not have to do that. They don't have to experience life or just screw up their whole life to know what goes well and what doesn't. It is clear based upon Koheleth's intentions that he's made it crystal clear that wisdom has been given for humankind to follow. In other words, one does not have to learn how to live by experiences or events. They don't have to screw their life up in order to go, well, man, gee, maybe I shouldn't have did that. But one can use wisdom within their events in their life that they find themselves in. This is the gospel or the good news of this book. That Koheleth has laid out various events that occurs in all of our lives and how to think about them and the choices you make with them. That is the whole purpose of Ecclesiastes, and I would submit to you, even Proverbs, that you don't have to figure out life yourself. He's given us this wisdom to know. The word shepherd is the Hebrew word ra'ah. Now, this is different from the other word ra'ah. The spelling is different. The word to see or consider, right? To inspect one's quality. We've been looking at that word. This is different. This one contains the word for ra'ah, to see or consider, contains an aleph, where this word for shepherd contains an ayin, okay, as you can see there in the word itself. This word occurs 164 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is a verb, by the way, and it only occurs once here in the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay? Again, this word is in the qual stem. It is active. And again, it means either to feed or to pasture in terms of the animals, or when it's talking about the individual who's guiding these animals, of course, it is the shepherd. It is also used for pastor, which again is another word for shepherd, right? Pasturing sheep, so to speak. Okay. In this context, this word is used with the numerical Hebrew echad, which is one here in this text. Okay. They are given by one shepherd. This is used to refer to the primary source of this wisdom. Again, this underscores once more Koheleth's intentionality, right? That he's not just using Aesop's fables, right? This isn't just pithy sayings or quotes, right? These proverbs themselves are sourced in God, which means that God wants you to have these for your life and for mine. Again, this underscores again, some people think that God is a kid with a magnifying glass just playing with us down here. Ecclesiastes blows that out of the water, because the intent of Koheleth's tasks in general is to underscore the wisdom of life itself. And Koheleth recognizes that all of this wisdom is sourced in God himself. And it's fascinating that he uses the term shepherd, because what do shepherds do? They guide and direct their animals, their sheep. Not to calamity, but to protect them and keep them. I find that to be fascinating. Of course, we see the word shepherd used throughout the Hebrew and Greek scriptures, and even Jesus himself refers to himself as the good shepherd, which is interesting. Verse 12. We're coming up to the end here. But beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearing to the body. Koheleth gave one final instruction to the congregation of Israel. The writing or production is no end to many books. Koheleth also mentioned that excessive devotion or increased study negatively impacts one's physical or material state. Don't study too much. Don't tell us that, though. Okay. Why? Because it physically can impact us. The conclusion, verse 13, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, for this, because this applies to every person. Koheleth gave the conclusion, that is the word, that there, the conclusion. Debar is the word for conclusion. The word, when all has been heard concerning his research, he's going to sum it up for us in one sentence, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. Now, this brings up another question. What do the word commandments mean? Is he talking about the 10 commandments? Is he talking about the law? What is he talking about here? Okay. Some translators or some commentators believe that the 10 commandments is what he's referring to here. There are others that believe that it's something else, and we'll talk about it. Commandments is the Hebrew word mitzvah, 184 times in the Hebrew scriptures. There occurs 2 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. I would submit to you that there's 3 possibilities for this particular word. There's 1, a command of a king or governing authority, a commandment of God, such as like the law or the 10 commandments. And then there's one last one, which I will mention briefly. First, let's look at Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 5, real quick. This word mitzvah shows up in Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verse 5. It says, since the word of the king is authoritative, who will say to him, what are you doing? He who keeps the royal command experiences no trouble, for a wise heart knows the proper time and procedure. So, what is the difference here? What is the drive of this word here? Well, the drive of this word is the command of a king or a governing authority, particularly a person, right, who's been given this authority. So, I don't think it's that. Okay? We can erase that there. Now we have the commandment of God, that is the law, or something else. Well, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 17 and 18, you do not have to turn there. I have it on the screen. He says this, you shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and his testimonies and his statutes, which he has commanded you. You shall do what is right and good in the sight of the Lord, and it may be well with you, that you may go in and possess the good land which the Lord swore to give to your fathers. Oh, well, I don't remember God promising me any land, right? So this must be the nation of Israel, given the law of Moses as a national people, right? And how to conduct themselves. So it can't be this, because that doesn't apply to me, nor does it apply to you. We are not Israel, okay? So it can't be these two options. A human being in authority did not give these commands, as Koheleth made it clear that the source of this wisdom is God. That's Ecclesiastes chapter 12, 1 and verse 11. So you can remove man from the equation. And although this word is used for a collection of ordinances that make up the law of Moses, it cannot be this either, because the law of Moses was given to Israel. That includes the 10 Commandments, by the way, where Koheleth wrote, this is for all mankind, in verse 12 and verse 13. This applies to every person. So the demonstrative pronoun ze, this, that is the pronoun there in this verse, applies to the information that is contained in this book, Ecclesiastes. This stuff applies to every person. Again, once more, Koheleth has not told us anything new concerning this text. Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 7. For in many dreams and in many words there's emptiness, rather fear or acknowledge God, right? In Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verses 12 to 13, although a sinner does evil 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear him openly. He says it twice here, right? So it can't be that. It can't be the commandment of God found by way of the law of Moses. I believe that the command or ordinance is concerning wisdom and how to live and conduct oneself and observe life itself. Oh man, I am out of time. Let's go real fast here. Verse 13, for God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden concerning good or evil. Let's talk about this real briefly. Koheleth stated in his final statement of his discourse that God will evaluate all activity of things that are concealed, whether good, that is the quality of them, the quality of the activity, whether it is good or bad. Okay? God will bring everything into judgment, or evaluate everything, so live well, right? There's 3 important things from this final statement. The first thing to note is this ought to be a comfort for those who live intentionally with wisdom in mind and are not recognized by anyone. You know, most people won't see the things that we do or the deeds that we do, but God does, right? and they will be recognized and evaluated by God. So even though other people may not see the good things that we do, God does, and we will be rewarded for those and evaluated by them. The second thing to recognize is the success of a person's life is not based on the outcome when a decision from wisdom is made. Use wisdom even if the outcome doesn't end the way you want it to. And the third note is if a person is not living intentionally, this ought to motivate a person to live intentionally, because God will evaluate the quality of a person's activities. And since God has given the information as how to live, it ensures one has a good quality life while living here. That's the point. To sum up, he completes his discourse with the following points: that a person ought to consider their youthfulness and how it is a temporal reality. That a person ought to consider wisdom and the source of wisdom, who is God. God has given this to us for us to live well. And God has provided the information necessary to have God evaluate us well. If he's given this information to us, well, then we ought to use it, because it will not only give us a better quality of life, but we will be evaluated by this when we go and stand before him. That is the end of chapter 12. We have come to the end of Ecclesiastes, but we're not done with it, because we have to do a review. And we will do that, Lord willing, in the preceding weeks to come. And then after that, we will head on into the book of Daniel. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll close out. Lord, thank you so much for your word and you giving this to us. It shows that you are a God who cares for us, that you are a God who wants us to do well. You've given us the cheat code on how to navigate through life, and we don't have to do it by ourselves. We don't even have the hardware to do it by ourselves, which is why you've given it to us. May we continue to be mindful of this wisdom when we live here and make choices that are consistent with how you've created reality for us. Thank you again for Koheleth, and thank you again for his intentionality to establish these proverbs, this wisdom for us. For it's in your son's name. Amen.